to be a little more entertaining, hopefully, than theirs, so you'll get that too. But this is not the theming presentation. This is actually the out-of-the-box theming recap. The project is also known as Cat Herding for Plone. And to introduce myself, my name is Vita Williams. I work for One Northwest, which is the company that sponsored the 2006 Seattle Plone Conference. And I've been doing skinning for about 2.5 years now. I've got probably 40-some sites going right now as well. Been doing some skinning work here and there and working on plone.org and God only knows how many ways. So just to kick this off, basically what happened is my colleague John Stahl and some other folks from the Plone Foundation Board got together at Google and they decided that they wanted to have the Plone Strategic Planning Summit, which basically was trying to pick out some of the low-hanging fruit and see how we can make some really easy contributions to the Plone community and kind of clean things up a little bit. So out of this, of course, we got a bunch of different champion topics, one of which is this particular one, which is to ship with more themes out of the box. At least this is specifically what is written down on plone.org as far as like delivering, or rather organizing theme sprints. If and when Deliverance is delivered, that has been hanging out there for about 2 years now. So obviously this was not really quite what I thought it was going to be, but we'll get into that a little bit more. One of the first questions I had when starting this is what it means to be a champion, because quite frankly, I don't have a lot of time, and I was really concerned that this was going to be something that was going to suck up a lot of my time. But as it turns out, it's supposedly just about shepherding people and getting things moving and keeping things moving. The problem is that it actually does suck up a lot of time, but it is kind of cool at the same time, because we did get a lot of things out of this. I wondered also, as I say, I do a lot of skinning, but I wondered why people thought I would be appropriate for this. But, you know, somebody also thought I did have some free time on my hands and decided that they would add my name to the list, which of course is my friend John Stahl. So I'll get even later. At this point, as I say, I looked at what the actual directive was. And, you know, as I say, Deliverance wasn't really something that I knew much about at that point. And shipping themes with Plone is sort of introduced the concept of being able to download Plone, go to some sort of configlet, look through all the themes, install, uninstall, all this great stuff. But when I looked at it a little closer, we didn't really have any themes, which sort of meant that there was not much point building this functionality around that. And in addition, Deliverance was in a fairly raw state. A lot of people have been talking about it like it's the Great White Hope or the next big sliced bread, when in reality, it looks a little bit like this. And so at this point, I got a little frightened, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I started really getting scared because the real problem here was not that, you know, Deliverance wasn't ready. The real problem was that I did not know how to skin 3.0 sites. And I was already being asked to get all the community together and do this kind of thing, but I took the challenge. And that is when I started thinking about what was really going on out there. And more than anything, I kind of looked at it from the perspective of where I felt like things were falling down for me. Like, I work with some really bright people, but at the same time, I felt that the transition from 2.5 to 3.0 was really tremendous. And not knowing how to get where we were going, documentation was really pretty crappy or non-existent. You know, as far as like the bar to entry, people are being asked to know CMF plone layer, you know, I mean CMF layers. You know, there's now ZOP 3 stuff, there's ZCML, there's XML, there's all these things like going around. And to me, it was a little frightening in general. And as far as active themers go, you know, we have a couple of people out there. We've got David Convent, who's really been consistent about putting documentation out there. Dennis Mishinov, who's done some really great themes. But I didn't really know anybody aside from the people that we contracted with to do themes. And so it was getting a little concerning out there. And as I say, Deliverance was not something I wanted to go near. And at that point, I realized I was in hell. But it got better. I decided to take a closer look at it and kind of look at the challenges, I say, from where I was coming from in terms of the things that I knew I could fix or at least make a little bit better. And, you know, and in terms of like alleviating pain for other themers, quite frankly, I didn't care about anybody else. I just wanted to do this for me, and if there were great side effects, then that's awesome. So I kind of sat down and put together a list of things that I thought would help. Of course, you know, there's the obligatory generating more themes for 3.0. best practices, because at this point nothing was documented. Gaps in knowledge, wow, lots to document here. Using the information to lower the bar of difficulty. This I kind of look at as more of like what happens at the end of the out-of-the-box project. This wasn't something that we were going to be doing throughout the project, so this actually hasn't happened yet. Improving the UI on plone.org to make the themes findable. For those of you who have ever looked for a theme on plone.org, you know that you can go to the list and you can search for it, but if you even want to know what it looks like, you have to click through to every single one just to get a screenshot. And it is incredibly painful, and it looks, to people who are new to plone, it is one of those things that you really don't want to have happen. You know, we really want to make things findable, we want to make people excited, and this is one of the things that I'm trying to work on here. Ultimately though, as I say, I just wanted to sleep through the night. I'm tired of thinking about plone all the time and thinking about the shortcomings and worrying about, in particular, where themers are getting screwed. This project was about making that a little better for people and trying to make some changes. So this has never really happened before. I think that most of the sprints that people have are, sure, you know, they go off to some castle and they've got windmills that are generating power or whatever the hell's going on up there. But my challenge was to take all these people in the plone community, many of whom I have never met, I didn't know who they were, they could be crazy, I didn't know. So I decided to start what's called a rolling sprint. And this was not something that's been, as I say, done before, but what I decided to do was open up a project on open plans and invite some people in and see kind of what happened, see what the response rate was. So as I say, I didn't really put out that many emails. I think maybe there were 3 emails that went out to the user list. And what I just got a couple of nibbles. I think within the first 2 weeks we got maybe 15 signups, which wasn't too bad. And from there, it just turned into people on Pound Plone who were, you know, basically saying, oh, you gotta go to this. You know, and sure, a lot of times they didn't even know what it was. They just kept telling people to show up, and for the love of God, they kept doing it. I also kind of wanted to structure this because I'm not just a scanner, I do project management too. And so I wanted to set it up so that there was actually some sort of structure around it so that people felt like they had something to get to at the end of it. In this case, milestones. We had it set up originally so that there would be 2 milestones. The first one, of course, is, you know, about a 2-month period where people go and they generate their themes, and then they come back and, you know, we test them, and then they fix them, and then they put them out on plone.org. Well, it was great until, you know, basically what happened here is that we made it through 1 milestone. But it was really awesome because everybody made it through the gate at the same time. It was pretty awesome. People actually paid attention. And I think that shows that we had some success there. As far as the scattershot approach I'm talking about here, I really, you know, it's like I wanted to see what the response rate was and see how that, you know, see exactly how that might affect things. And scattershot, if you look, is sort of like World of Warcraft. You know, it's a short-range shot, 50% weapon damage, and disorientation for 4 seconds, which basically equates to you get some effect, some impact, but you don't really necessarily get it all, and you kind of, you know, you make a little bit of a stir and then kind of dissipates. And that looks something like that. No one dies, and sometimes you win. So here's about the time that I had to figure out how I was going to report back to the Plone Foundation and tell them that I was not a loser, and I was not crazy, and I was not going to hell. Actually, I still was. The metrics for success that we had here was trying to figure out how many people we had involved, the number of themes, and what that really meant in terms of, you know, some of the other themes that we had available to us. Of course, email traffic, installer improvements, and finally, of course, the UI changes to plone.org. Number of participants, pretty fucking amazing. Sorry, I know you're filming. We got 49 people as of last week, which, considering I sent out 3 emails, that's really something. I think that shows that the community is actually talking more than they think they are, and I think that's pretty fabulous. Out of that, probably I would say the first people that signed up are the ones who tended to be the active contributors, but you know, 10 people isn't too shabby. And out of that, of course, almost 50% of the people were talking on the discussion lists about this. So yeah, as I say, the project sort of took on a life of its own at this point, and I was really pretty psyched that it started running itself and people were communicating and talking, and it wasn't just me acting as a figurehead. Again, 20% contribution rate and 50% contribution level to discussion. That is pretty remarkable. I don't know how many other sprints can say that, considering this one has been running since February of this year. Not too shabby. And number of themes. So I did a count. We had 66 last week, and we got 16 out of this project. You know, it's not great. I would have liked to have kind of cornered people in a room and said, okay, let's turn out 20 this weekend, which is what we're doing this weekend. But, you know, ultimately 16 themes, all of them delivered on time. And they all got tested. Again, 25% of the themes are the ones that are on plone.org, or 25% of the themes on plone.org are from this project. Email traffic. When I mentioned earlier hard metrics, I said hard metrics because my math is really terrible. So I was guessing a little bit, but we have about 65 unique threads and probably 300 some emails. And for those of you who are on the list, if you didn't unsubscribe, I'm a little surprised because the traffic was really insane for a while there. But email trends. There was a good bit of conversation, I would say, for at least during the first milestone. People really had a lot of questions and there were a lot of thoughts coming out. And then little by little, it kind of dropped off. And finally, at the very end, I sent out an email actually right before the conference and asked people, you know, can you tell me how this went, what your experience was? And it looked a little bit like this. And in fact, the only person who responded was my former employer. But, you know, that said, I think that maybe some of the reason why that didn't happen is because, you know, of course, you know, we answered a lot of really important questions. I'm not going to talk about the other thing about, you know, where this stuff belongs, but I think that there is also a sense that people got kind of burned out, got a little tired, because it started to feel more like a job, even to me, so. Now, as far as some of the things that we have managed to do, again, you know, more metrics, the installer improvements that Steve McMahon has put into place are really, really awesome. I can't say enough good things about this because for anybody who has spent 2 days trying to get plone up and running on your brand new machine, this is huge. It's not completely ready yet. I mean, not as I say all of them. I don't have an Intel machine, and so trying to install, you know, plone on your class the other day was not able to, but, you know, we're working in the right direction, so. UI changes. I'm going to let you guys go take a look at these if you want to. They don't look like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is more like we're kind of trying to make some very small functional changes to plone.org that basically are set up so that, you know, you can see them, you know that they're there, they're kind of randomized so you get some variety, but it's not so in your face that we can't maintain it, because if we only have 66 themes, you know, we really don't necessarily want to kind of have it so front and center that we can't maintain it and there's just not enough themes to go around. So if you want to take a look at the sketches, please do. Alexander has said that we're going to go ahead and do it. It's just down to Steve McMahon and me kind of trying to push this through, and anybody else, quite frankly, who wants to volunteer. So, knowledge. Oh yes, this one was my most. For me, this was the most important part of this entire project. Not knowing how to do themes myself, this was huge. I really felt like the email threads were where this kind of happened more than anything. A lot of people had there were some pretty common questions, you know, and as I say, there were 66 some threads. One of the best ways to override a style sheet. This one has been going around since, about a year now. I don't know who here has ever used the paster recipe to generate a theme, but what happens when you do that is that if you say, you know, please override plone style sheets, it throws a bunch of empty style sheets into your folder, and you're like, what the hell? You know, what is this? This is garbage. And anybody who is from Drupal or Joomla or whatever, they're going to look at that and think, oh, that's trash. Why did they do that this way? There should be a different way. So the conversation became, you know, let's go ahead and let's do this through the CSS registry because generic setup's awesome. But the problem is it doesn't really work that way. We still have some issues there. And what it comes down to is that, you know, yes, you can do it through empty style sheets. Yes, you can do it through the CSS registry. The choice has to be yours, though. You have to know that if you're doing a project for the OOTB project, you need to do it through empty style sheets, just because otherwise you run the risk of impacting somebody else's ZOAP instance, and we don't really want that. When and how to use the browser folder. Woohoo! I don't know who has ever tried to guess what's ZOAP 2 and what's ZOAP 3. I sure as hell wonder every day. I think at this point a lot of themers we generate our theme, and there's skins, in the browser folder, and there's skins in the other stuff, in the skins folder, and then there's like main.css up here, and there's empty style sheets over here, and it didn't really make any sense. And so people were really kind of wondering what the hell goes where. And what it came down to is that the really geeky people want to be able to expose their stuff to the browser layer, but the rest of us really don't care. It can pretty much all go in there. And in fact, the way that it's set up right now for images and style sheets in the browser directory is wrong. It's flat out wrong. You can't actually put them inside of folders without having to override every single thing in that folder if you decide to make a change to one of those resources. So, there's a lot of information there, but the cool thing is that, I think a lot of people started to see that, we're not being forced to do something. They were trying to show us, here's what's possible. But obviously, this caused some confusion. We've got some splinter recipes that came out of this. And, certainly, I know I shouldn't be using it, but I do. I use a recipe that one of my friends wrote because I don't want to spend an hour trying to reconfigure the way the theme is currently output. So I think that we have some issues, certainly, to consider, and possibly some changes coming, but the resistance is to documentation. People really don't want to change the documentation, and I know you can't really read that, but David Convent was getting to the point where he was, I haven't used the plone template, but my understanding here is that what happens is you can actually just plug stuff in. Like, you get your base stuff, and if you want to add more, you can. Whereas, the paste recipe that we use for theming, it just gives us everything. And so it'd be really nice to kind of fit that stuff in, and it's certainly on David's mind, and he owns the template. So he's the man who can ultimately help us here. Denis Mishinov, he was thinking as a short patch that maybe we just say something like, do we use style sheets and images there in the browser folder? Again, that's not really a fix. That's sort of like a half-hearted, okay, we concede that it's ugly to people downloading these themes, but this doesn't address the fact that, you shouldn't have your images and style sheets in folders. This doesn't address the fact that it's just messy. And it doesn't address the fact that if you don't want it, why is it in my theme? And ultimately, it came down to Martin Espelli, who basically said that if we don't do something about deliverance, we are screwed. And this is really where we're getting at. It's screwed in terms of like brand new people coming in. If you are from Drupal or you're from Joomla, I don't think anything that we're doing for theming is completely obvious. I haven't used Drupal or Joomla, but it's not obvious to me. Let's see, another question here was Espen Moe Nielsen was wanting to integrate the Subskins product with the CSS Manager tool. I didn't actually take this very literally. What I was thinking about is more that we have a lot of tools running around right now, and it would be really nice if we take advantage of that and as a community kind of pick through and see what pieces that we want to tie together. Be it the paste recipe and Subskins and CS Manager or whatever it is that we want to do. Maybe deliverance isn't the answer. And there's certainly thought that maybe it isn't. It just depends on whether it solves all of our use cases or at least the base use cases. Anything could happen here. DTML support. I don't know if everybody here uses DTML, and some people don't actually like it, but the nice thing about it is that if you use DTML, you can make some very quick changes across the board to your style sheets, or rather to your website, just by using some sort of variable, like, okay, I want to change font color blah, and it'll change it in every place on your website. If you are using the paster recipe right now, you don't actually get to see what that looks like. They don't give you a style sheet to work with. And so if you don't know it exists and you don't know how to put it in place, you don't get it. And that's basically wasting base properties power, and that's also CSS Manager. That's all these things that originally gave our integrators the chance to make some really quick fixes. We're losing right here because it's not in the recipe. The age-old question. Yes, I believe it is. And in this case, this first comment here is from Denis Mishinov, who basically was saying, please, please, please use viewlets. And I agree that for the most part, yeah, that's true, but I have certainly modified my main template since 3.0, and I continue. And, but again, as a caveat, for the OOTB themes, we want to keep things as clean as possible, and this is probably not the place to be making main template changes unless you're doing it so that you can maybe use tableless or something like that. But again, document your work. Publishing a product, plone.org. I have not done this myself, We probably should document it. I mentioned this first bit here about PyPy. This is Jonathan Speedbreeze. He had some themes that were never actually uploaded to plone.org. And I don't know if it was because he didn't know how or, it was just too onerous. But I think there was definitely some questions about how to eggify something. And for themers, this isn't something that's necessarily very obvious to us. I think that your average programmer probably knows that right off the bat, but we just haven't figured out where that documentation is. Documentation again. As far as what a theme needs, there should always be a README and an install.txt. We don't have an install.txt. When you open up a base theme product generated from Paster, all it says is, this is a 3.0 theme. Good luck. As opposed to saying, you need to put your ZCML slug here, you need to put your egg here, you need to put your file here. All that stuff needs to be generated out of the box, and it's currently not doing that. So we know that this is a to-do, and even if it's just like a very base skeletal thing, we know it needs to happen. And again, for the case of the OOTB project, we had this documented. We pulled out some examples from Dennis Mishinov about how to do this, and he's got some really great examples. So as far as gauging a success on this, it's kind of empty in here. So I don't really know if, I don't know what other people think. I don't know who was on the project necessarily, at least face-to-face wise, but I think it was not too shabby. I mean, we have 25% of the existing 3.0 themes. We had a lot of people talking. We've got installer improvements by Steve M., who is following the email threads. We've got UI changes coming soon, very soon, I hope. And ultimately, we've got a lot of holes in the documentation that we now know about, which maybe we sensed it before, but I think that now there is a little more indication of specifically what pieces are missing. And, I think that certainly some people have been working on patching some holes. Ann Botel, who is here, not in the room right now, but she contributed the theming manual to plone.org, and it's pretty awesome. Covers viewlets, covers everything you need to know. And then, of course, David Convent and I last week finished writing the theming chapter for the new Through the Web book, which is nearing completion. I don't really know. It is going to be practical plone? Supposedly. We shall see. But that will be coming out probably in the next couple of months. That's my hope. And I'm now editor for the theming section. Not because I necessarily want to, but because no one else is standing up. So if anybody's available, let me know. What I think this comes down to is that, this has been an 8-month project, which is fairly unique in terms of sprints. But I think that definitely the first 2 months were the most successful. So people are, they get tired. And shorter sprints may work better, or concentrated sprints where you're in person, or, somehow using this information and every now and then coming back and saying, okay, this week let's, crank out on our 10% manifesto, one theme per Friday. That could possibly happen and be a little more successful. We've got some emails out there as far as documentation goes that need to be pulled out. And, I think the thing that kind of, I don't know if it concerns me or I'm still excited about it, but people keep showing up. It's like every couple of days I get a new email in, and I think that people still have some interest in this, and I don't know if it's because they want to contribute themes or they think that this is some sort of information repository. And, it's going to take a little while for that to sort out, but in the meantime, I think it comes down to trying to figure out where we're going from here. And it looks almost like a straight line, kind of. I think we're coming back, of course, to the UI improvements. More documentation, fun. Deliverance. I'm going to be talking to Alexander this week and taking a look at that, and he's probably going to come up and maybe come to Seattle and work a little bit on that, so we can at least see if it fits the general use case of most of us who are out there who have a small client, or you want to do a big project, but you're not an enterprise level kind of person. It's, we're going to have to see where that's at. And I think the project's going to continue, but I'm sick of sending out emails. I'm sick of reading emails. I think that at this point I'd like to see if this could be done as like a 10% manifesto, or have people get together this weekend and generate some themes and just use it as a place where we can sort of store this stuff, and if people want to do it, then they do it. But it's not necessarily something I feel like I have time to run. And of course, we have a new theming book coming out. Yikes. It's only 5 chapters in out of 13, so don't get too excited. Theming sprint coming up this weekend. Please, please, please come, because we need lots of people. I think we've got more people signed up for the theming sprint than we do for anything else. So I think that says a lot. Oh, and of course, you know, I think that everybody would like to see the themes that were produced for this. As I say, we had 16. We have a couple by David Little here. One is at the end. Duffy D. Pigeon Flight has a couple here. And not all of these are actual screenshots. You know, and a couple of them are, but some of them I was getting a little, I'm not even sure if this one exists. I think it does. I'm going to pretend it does, because it screws up my metrics. Of course, Dennis Missionov, the hosting theme. For those of you who aren't really that familiar with theming, these two in particular are probably the best examples. And this one is one of my favorites in terms of like showing you what you can do with Kupu, showing how you can mess with tables and change your homepage look and feel a little bit without getting too invasive. It's not heavy programming, but they're still really nice. This Speed Breeze, 16-year-old kid kicking our asses. You know, we got to get more people out there, so.
Yeah, anybody who does plone theming is hard. Jonathan, we have a 16-year-old who never used plone before.
His mom can theme. Don't even tell me.
Kicked out 5 of these in 6 weeks.
I thought he did it in the weekend, so all right, so I don't feel so bad.
Well, I don't know what, he presumably was going to school sometime in there, I don't know. Maybe he was hanging on the corner right.
Could be. Green Community, I forgot who did this one, and I apologize. I meant to check on this morning. We've got the headaches. This one just came in. This is actually not necessarily part of the OOTB project, but the person who, of course, was working on it decided to kind of submit it because we're supposed to test it and still run it through the ordinary process to make sure it kind of meets plone standards. So it is on my list of many things to do. This is the theme that's going to be used for the new Through the Web Practical Plone book. Of course, this one is very nice. And this one just came in about a week ago, and I have a typo. My apologies there. So I think that's about it. I am done for now. So is there anybody here, out of curiosity, who was actually on the OOTB project?
I didn't make any, but
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming. Is there any, do you have any questions or?
I have like a general question.
Yeah.
What do you use for incentives to obtain sprinters?
Guilt. Lots and lots of guilt. Now, you know, I think most people were actually pretty self-motivated in this case. I think that they knew we were trying to make a huge difference and that we were in a bad space, but I think that also where we fell down after things started slowing down was that we didn't have incentive, because I can't mail beer and pizza every time we need some themes put out there. So
Can you now be beer and pizza occasionally?
there are sprints coming. I think, and I don't mean like the DC sprint.
Is the motivation competition against other frameworks?
I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think it's just that people don't really have the time, and you know, to do one of these actually, you know, it might take 6 to 8 hours, and so it's not something that you can just kind of crank out in an afternoon. I mean, you might have to take a couple of days to work on it, and you know, without anybody knowing that it's actually going to be seen, like without the UI changes, people are like, yeah, it's going in that little vacuum. There it goes. You know, saw it go. You know, it was on the blog for one day and it's gone. So I don't think that it's. I think that people are motivated, but I'm thinking like a really exciting sprint somewhere that no one's been, like Antarctica, would maybe get people excited again. I just don't know.
Well, you said we're in a really bad place. What do you mean by that?
I mean that we have not, we actually got our theming manual up 1 year, almost to the day that Plone 3.0 was released, which means that in that entire year, we've been guessing, asking questions, and being told, deliverance, that's the answer, you know, and in fact, I saw that happen on Pound Plone the other day, and I'm like, ugh. You know, it's painful that we've had to work so hard and not have any real documentation. I mean, most of what we have is unfinished, and that's what I mean. Like, we have the knowledge across the board, like, spread out amongst people, but I don't think that it's written down to where your average person who is using Drupal can walk in and know what to do. But.
I wanted to say congratulations on the best practices page that you have on the.
Oh, thanks.
I think that is, you know,
Is it work?
to solving some of these problems is having best practices written down and having it updated so it changes.
I think, and you know, more I look at it, I want to move some of that stuff back to plone.org where it's appropriate. But yeah, I think there's definitely, I looked at it the other day, I'm like, ooh, delete. That doesn't belong there. Or, you know, it is kind of helpful because I know I refer to it as.
So for instance, I'm an integrator and I can take a contractor and I can say, do it like this.
Yep.
You know, and
I mean, they're really generic, but yeah, at the same time, I mean, it does at least provide some guidelines in terms of, do an uninstall routine, or make sure you get rid of this folder, or whatever it is that is important for your best practices, certainly it helps. But, yes?
I have a question about the management of this one-year project. The whole thing sounds a bit like you are managing the chaos, and it's like without knowing the people coming to work and not knowing about what your real targets are, exploring the whole thing during the process is very
Ambitious?
ambitious.
I would say it wasn't that chaotic. Not in the beginning. I think it was self-forming.
Yeah, it was self-forming, and you have certainly had the key part of it. You said you were sending 3 emails in the beginning, and you were focusing on some open plans.
Mhm.
Could you tell a little bit more how you were stimulating the project to keep the straight line?
I would send out updates every now and then, and so like one of the things, rather than just sending out emails all the time saying, "Hey, I need you, please sign up for a theme." I mean, yes, I did that, but I also used it as a way to keep people informed and saying, here are the top 3 things that are happening this month in terms of theming, and this meeting is happening, and people are getting together to talk about deliverance, and we've got like beta testing going here, or like just to kind of keep people informed of like, yes, we have a manual coming, just so that they knew that there was like more behind them than just me, like nagging them, because I didn't want to be that kind of person. But I think certainly that helped, and the email list of people talking to each other, that definitely alleviated a lot of that. But yes.
I have more than one question.
All right.
And you kind of answered one, but I just want to get your opinion about it. So when you were talking about the milestone approach, I assume that means that it had a deadline date.
Yes, correct.
And so you said you think you're going to abandon that approach, and which I was thinking about, well, how do you get volunteers to commit to deadlines? But if you abandon these things, then how do you think you're going to approach being able to do the Q&A process and actually push things forward and be able to measure what you're doing and everything like that? When would you measure it? And
Right.
and how do you think that's going to affect things? Do you have any approaches that you're going to try to use to make more, we used to call this feature-based milestones instead of time-based milestones? And at some point, plone in the beginning was feature-based milestones, and then it went to time-based, and they both have their disadvantages.
Right, and I'm not saying that milestones are entirely off on this. I think what I'm getting at is, for now, I think that the interest has died down a little bit, and so either it needs to take a break and shift a little bit, and maybe we can come back to that again. I think that worked fairly well. As far as the testing stuff goes and keeping the standards up, we have to look at this from the perspective of not everybody's going to be part of the OOTB project. Like, a lot of people are just going to contribute themes right to plone.org, and so we need a mechanism in place there to kind of say, okay, here's what our guidelines are. Did you include tests? Did you actually test on these browsers? And have that stuff in place so that we can kind of gauge that. And I would like to, I don't want to, I feel bad like doing it as part of like the editor role for the documentation section because it's not appropriate, but I would like to have kind of a pool of people who could do that and, occasionally just say, oh yeah, I tested it on my iPhone and it's good.
So you think having a milestone deadline contributed to some of the burnout?
Yeah. The first one was great. First one was awesome. I mean, literally, people nailed it within like 2 to 3 days of when they were asked to do stuff. But, after that, it was like, I think that people just got busy or the glamour wore off. We weren't seeing the immediate rewards of the UI changes. And for me, that was one of the things of, yay, thanks, guys. Sorry you can't see them, but.
So the other approach you mentioned was a scattershot approach. And so you put out a call for interest and whatnot through various communications mediums. And so do you ever consider soliciting engagement directly to specific people that you would like to have involved?
Now that I know who they are, probably, yeah.
So how do you identify who they should be?
I mean, my feeling is if you show up and if your theme passed most of the metrics for testing, and that stuff is posted out there on the list on the open plans. I mean, you can see who had major problems with their themes and who did not. I think that that's a clear indicator of who's conscientious and doing the right things. Certainly those are people I'd love to contact and certainly expand out if as necessary. But
I guess the third question I have that kind of ties into that a little bit then would be, so basically one of your biggest problems was the lack of documentation to begin with. And
Yep.
It's a chicken and egg problem when you have a technology that's undocumented and you're told, okay, well, you can help contribute to this by providing the documentation about something that you don't know how it works. And this is just sort of endemic in open source. When you say release early, release often, people, as soon as they have some code available, they release it, probably without the documentation. So would people releasing undocumented code then be a target for people to solicit for engagement? Look, you sort of handed us this gift of software, but you also handed us a problem with it.
I don't think that they handed us a problem. I think that the problem that happened as far as like missing documentation is a lot of the emphasis was put on David Convent and Dennis Missionoff to deliver that. They have been long considered like the two people who are heading the challenge, and they got tired, you know, and there really hasn't been a very active community. We've been very quiet as a group, and I think that not having any cohesive sense and not having any sort of team spirit is what contributed to the problem of lack of documentation, because the knowledge was there. I know because it's unpublished and it's sitting there half finished. But, you know, there's just been nobody to finish the stuff. And now that people are a little more familiar and they're talking to each other, I think that sets us up really well. You know, I don't think it was the software being released without them telling us.
So, not without it telling us, but you say the knowledge is there, where?
It's in a couple of people's heads, and it's unpublished form on plone.org, which hopefully will be getting completed this weekend. There is a tutorial on how to theme for 3.0 sitting right there, half done, and all we have to do is finish it. You know, it's taken 1 year, but, so, anything else? Yeah?
I mean, obviously, I'm John Stahl, I work with Lead at One Northwest. We've talked about this project a lot, but I think there's a couple of really interesting, sort of really big picture learnings that other people who have similar problems could take home. One is that, I mean, there are a lot of senses in which this is the way that open source is supposed to work. There was an itch, you organized to get it scratched.
Right.
And that's the best, that is sort of by definition the best people to solve the problem, are the people who are feeling the pain. Because you're going to know better than anyone. You knew better than anyone else what the right answer was, and it really shows in the quality of the work products. You know, they're awesome because they're so hard-based in reality, and they're so based in the sort of reality of the pain. So
Right.
that's, you know, even though it's painful, it's actually success.
Right.
The second thing that I think is really important to take home is that you took a really great systems approach to this. I mean, you really didn't just think, oh, our job is to produce, you know, a chunk of code, but you looked at the whole cycle from the motivation, how do we communicate, you know, how does it get documented, how do we do quality assurance on it. You really took a really holistic approach that I've never seen anybody else doing any work in this community take, you know, that much of a holistic approach to a sort of a group.
You should see my napkin design for what I think deliverance should look like.
It's actually, sorry, let me just make the third comment that is actually, I didn't even realize until you just sort of implied it right now, is that you were actually provided something that deliverance, by which I mean whatever the future of the theming story in Plone turns out to be, what you have basically provided to that without even maybe knowing it thus far is you have now established a group of people who are the reality check.
Right, and what I want to make a point.
The reality check on.
Right, and what I want to make a point of is that I don't want to be perceived as like the person who's like the theming person. My feeling is like we got here together. I mean, those email lists, you know, all those conversations certainly informed all of this, you know, and I'm not like just because I'm standing here doesn't mean I know any more than any other themer. It's just that no one else wanted to talk about this, and I just think that we need to stay mobilized.
Yeah, but there's now a group of people that everybody knows where to find.
Right.
To talk about this, and so
Right.
that's actually a huge, you know, even if the level of activity is low, there's a set of people who are known to be interested in this and known to have expertise.
And can be found again.
And can be found again and are
Right.
credible. And that's, you know, actually, you know, I think when we look back a year from now, we'll look back and that will actually prove to have been incredibly important.
Yeah, I agree. So, I think, yes.
I mean, one of the things about a sprint, not the rolling sprint idea, is that you get the initial energy, right? Everyone's in the one room and everyone's like pumped, and you don't have this dissipating long kind of thing.
Sure.
Did you think about running a remote sprint that was, say, video conferencing type thing? Where
I did. I mean, it comes down to the energy is finite in general, and workload has been monumental. And, that involves like basically being able to call stop to my life. And I didn't have that opportunity. I mean, somebody actually submitted an idea of having a sprint in, I think, Cuba or the Bahamas or something. And I'm like, God, that sounds great. Maybe next year. I would love to be able to do some sort of remote sprint like that. And if folks are up for it, then certainly we should. I think it'd be great.
Are there any geographic areas where the people in this project are, say, there's a spike in the number of people there? Because I just wonder about, distributing more localized sprints to solve this kind of problem.
I think the Europeans have us beat. I mean, there's a lot more Europeans and Australians involved than Americans, as far as I can tell. But that basically narrows things down a bit. But yeah, and just let guys know, I think our time is up. So, but if you guys have questions, please let me know. And thank you.
Thank you, Rita.